Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
I'm stunned. I am absolutely stunned. Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Broadcasting 2 hours, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. Central Time. So if you'd like to call us, that's the best time to call because that's when we're here. Number is 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. Telephone listen line's up and running. If you'd like to listen while you're working, 605-477-3249, 605-477-3249. And I guess if you're a government employee and you were listening to USA Prepares while you were at work, you could probably say that you're working. Doc Ram's with us, Dr. Richard Allen Miller. Welcome, Rick.
Good morning. How's my voice today on this one?
Oh, you sound loud and clear. Absolutely fabulous.
Well, yeah, it's all brand new equipment. I'm working with a new computer, and rather than my telephones, oh, man, Grants Pass, Oregon is, we're on I-5, so it's, we're in the normal slots 4x4 with LA moving up here. We have forest fires that are so bad. We are the worst in the nation right this moment. And the air quality is, you can't go outside. You can't wear a mask. The particulate in smoke is verging on nanometer, which means it goes through everything. And it is extremely toxic. And so firefighters that work in these conditions are usually, they have serious lung problems. And today, the sun is orange. It's real bad. I turn my air conditioning on, not so much because it's hot, but to keep the pressure positive in my house so it doesn't seep in. It'll fall right through the roof, come down through the flooring, and into the air because it's in nanometer. That's why you have to have an air conditioner or something that keeps the air pressure positive in your home so that the particulate does not get into your air.
Yeah, there's another component to that too. Actually, two other components. Air conditioning units, whether they're a window unit or whether they're a built-in central air conditioning system, have a filter, but that filter is certainly not going to.
No, that filter isn't going to do anything. It's impossible. That's right.
Right. But here is a component that may help a little bit, and that is as the air goes across the evaporator, and the evaporator is those cool fins that are closer to freezing in temperature. So as the air goes across those evaporator fins, the aluminum fins, the heat is extracted from the air. The air is cooled, and those plates condense the moisture in the air. And what happens is, I believe that some of the particulates get caught in the water droplets that are on the air conditioning evaporator, and they drip down into a tray, and then they go outside, or they go to wherever your air conditioning drain is. So I think that the three things that are helping, very, very, almost immeasurable, would be the air conditioning filter, but the evaporator plates, I think, are cleaning the air. And here's what I do, Rick, and maybe this might help, and I'd love to know your thoughts on the physics component of this. We have an air ionizer, and it's in the kitchen. and it's very close to the air intake, or what's called the return ductwork of our central air conditioning system. And then what I do is we have a standard heating system filter, which is it's like this sprayed fiberglass type mesh, and air goes right through it. So it really doesn't filter anything that's small. It just catches the big dust particles. What I do is I spray that outside with Endust, E-N-D-U-S-T, that furniture cleaning stuff. And it has this lemon scent, which I don't like. So I spray it outside, and it causes an electrostatic charge to build up on the air conditioning filter. And that's the filter that, they used to be 33 cents a piece, 3 for $1. Well, they're probably $1 or $2 or $3 now. They're the cheap ones. And you don't need to buy the expensive ones. You can buy the cheap ones. And if you spray them with Endust, they attract a lot more dust on the filter. Then what you can do is, if you have an an air compressor, I put on a respirator and I go outside and I blow them out. And I blow the air the exact opposite way that the air goes through the filter. So I mark which way with one of those Sharpie markers with an arrow, all around the filter, saying air goes this way. It travels this way, gets filtered this way. So I always put them back the same direction. And I have not bought a new air conditioner or heating system filter in 13 years. What I do is I just spray with Endust, and I take it outside, put a respirator on, note which way the wind is blowing, and I blow it so the dust that I'm blowing out of the filter goes away from me. And it really works. And with Endust, the attraction of the Endust, the electrostatic attraction, makes these filters grab even more dust. And then by putting the ionizer near there, I think I attract even more dust. What are your thoughts on that, Rick?
Well, swamp cooler. That's the way I did it in the early years, before air conditioning and Freon was being used up in Seattle. We never got real hot or humid days like you would on the East Coast or the Midwest. And so we use swamp coolers. And a swamp cooler is just a heat exchange system that, all physics is based on now. But I have some other things to talk about. I forgot all about it when you called me this morning on what I wanted to talk about. I have been invited to Canada to begin setting up sustainable lifeboats. I'm going up in mid-August, if everybody wants to make a note of this, because, in fact, what's happening is there's caravans coming out of Texas, Colorado, California. Vancouver Island had a very world-famous Chan Buddhist named Chan Tung that taught me a special form of Tai Chi back in the early 70s when I was training SEALs. And something happened. I became world champion in double sword, which is the 8th movement of Tai Chi, because this man taught me how to change my perception of time using breath control. And there is a Tai Chi group up there. I'm going to do a series of workshops, plural, in 3 different cities. But one of the workshops is going to be a brand new one I've never done before, called Power Tools. And it's going to include brain drivers and how to use brain drivers. But the group that's bringing me in, it's a Tai Chi group. And they want me to do the walk and showing them how this individual taught me a special technique in double yang style. And it turns out this group is 2 generations down from my teacher. And this grandmaster is really a grandmaster. I haven't even done Tai Chi in 30 years, but I'm excited because it's like riding a bicycle. It's going to get me back into my art form, and I haven't done it, but it's like riding a bicycle. You get back up, and it comes right back to you. And I practiced a little bit last night, and I surprised myself. It was very cool. It's that's why I just thought I'd mention, if people are interested, there's probably carfuls coming out of every state, coming up to Nanaimo, Parksville, and Kelowna. And Vancouver, BC is a big Chinese center right now. That's where all Hong Kong moved when they closed down Hong Kong. Instead of going to Hamburg, the seat of spice trade moved to Vancouver, BC. And I'm going to get to see a bunch of friends I haven't seen in 30 years and show them some techniques in Tai Chi. It's going to be kind of exciting. I've never done this before. And so there's one group coming out of Texas bringing a camera crew because we're going to do a movie, not on me, but on the people I meet. Imagine that. There's going to be some very strange people come out of the woodworks, and I'm very excited about it because when I do something like this, I actually learn more than I teach. And actually not learn, I study more. I get exposed. It's like teaching a school. In order to teach, you have to study it to get ready for the questions. And so a teacher learns more than actually the teacher gains as much as the students. I'm excited.
Well, I'm sure you are, and that's right. If I'm going to be doing a seminar, I'm going to brush up on the material and make sure that I've got it down pat, before I go on stage. So yeah, and now you're going to be bringing your double-edged sword with you.
My double-edged sword. Actually, I am a double-edged sword. A little bit of this and a little bit of that. True. Yes. Yeah.
Well, when you said double-edged sword, I was thinking that maybe
double
you
sword.
might want
to. I said double sword.
Oh, double sword,
not
okay.
Double-edged sword. Yeah, double sword.
Okay.
Double sword means that you do the Tai Chi movement, but you've extended your Chi 30 inches.
Okay. Well, when
That's
you
the
said
eighth movement.
sword,
In other words, all your Tai Chi movements are also done with weapons.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, when you said sword, I was thinking that you might be calling Amazon saying, "Hey, listen, I'm practicing, and I just wanted to come over to your place."
Seattle. I'm going to slide through Seattle. Oh, yeah. You'll read about that in the newspaper. I've got my pipe bombs and all. Nah. It's terrible. Amazon is a terrible monster. And at some point, they will flash at you, the Filipinos. They will fly, to other countries so that nothing gets resolved. They will pretend like something is resolved, and then you have 2 days to respond. It's crazy.
Well, and also they cancel orders. For example, I needed some red high-temperature synthetic grease, and I bought several cases of it for the farm. I ordered it through Amazon. This was a couple of years ago. They canceled the order. I'm waiting, and then I find out later on that they canceled the order. Since when do companies cancel orders? I guess that's a new thing, right? Well, I got an invitation. I'm all excited about it. I got an invitation in the mail for a clam bake. I'll tell you a little bit more about it when we come back. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us, and before I tell you about this invitation I got in the mail, we've got Truck Driver Jay in Texas. Welcome, Truck Driver Jay.
Hey, good morning, Vince, and good morning, Richard Allen Miller.
Good morning, Vietnam.
Hey, on the previous subject,
what's up?
On the previous subject y'all were talking about air conditioners. One of my previous jobs I used to have many moons ago, I was in air conditioning and heating, and the air conditioner is a dehumidifier. That's why you get the water coming out. It takes the humidity out of the air. The air filter is right there on the on that vent. Different size air conditioners, excuse me, use different size air filters. I used to work for a company that serviced the school system where I was living at, and the big schools had one really large air conditioning system, and the filters for those things are about 3 inches thick. They're absolutely huge.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And so what is the point? Is the point that yes, they do, the filter itself does filter a small amount of of the particulates, and that the evaporator, the cooling part, actually condenses particles in the air that's trapped by moisture. Is that what you're saying? That it actually does work?
Yes, it does. It condenses the moisture in the air onto it, and when enough moisture collects onto it, it drips down and on out the drain.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you calling. By the way, how fast are you going?
I'm doing 78 in Texas.
Okay.
Careful on here.
Well, I can
Texas.
Hey, I got another point. On one of my last runs, I hauled watermelon. And I don't know whether you've located this or noticed this or not, but it is almost impossible nowadays to find a real seeded watermelon.
You're absolutely right. We bought 2 of them and threw 2 of them out. They're inedible. You're absolutely right.
The seeded or the seedless?
No, these were seedless. I wanted an old-fashioned watermelon with the seeds, the kind that taste great, that have plenty of flavor, that are not like eating cardboard. Couldn't find it. All we could, and you don't know. You don't know when you go to buy them exactly what you're going to get. But we threw both of them out. They're unacceptable to us.
Well, where I had went to pick them up, I think I was in Georgia to pick them up. I asked, "Do y'all have any real seeded watermelons?" And the guy asked me, "What do you mean by real?" I said, "The ones with the seeds. The ones without the seeds are GMO." And he's like, "GMO?" I was like, "Yeah, genetically modified." He's like, "Oh yeah, because even though they're grown out in the field, the seedless watermelons do not have the same amount of chromosomes as the real seeded watermelons."
Yeah. They sort of look like watermelons. They're priced like watermelons. They've got the weight as a watermelon, well, close to the weight of a watermelon, but they don't seem to be watermelons to me. Hey, Jay, we're going into a break. Thank you so much for calling, and drive safely.
Okay, thank you.
And,
yeah. 78 miles an hour.
Broadcasting at 78 miles an hour. USA Prepares. We'll be right back. Yeah, in a couple minutes I'll give you the full procedure for what I do with end dust and the filters. But right now, David in Illinois. You're on with Doc Ram. Welcome.
How you doing? You guys were talking about air conditioning. Now, we had a new air unit installed here a few years back, and everybody that came out here wanted to put the minimal size unit, for your house. And we noticed when we moved here, everybody else's air units were running. When it gets really hot, they're running all day and all night. So we had to. It took us forever to find somebody that would go a half a ton bigger, and then they had the SEER unit outside that you wanted it as big as possible. So we went with 14 SEER, so it it cools off that coolant way faster.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What you're talking about is
way more efficient.
Yes, what you're talking about is efficiency. So if you have an outside unit with a larger condenser for the air conditioning component, you will have greater efficiency. But here's why they make the units smaller. Well, it costs less. But if you're running a smaller unit and you're running it longer, the belief is that you will dehumidify more of the air. So if you've got a really big unit that only runs, let's say, 10% of the time, you won't be removing as much humidity. So there is kind of a balance. However, I did what you are recommending here at our farm, and that is I put in a 19 SEER Lennox brand unit because Lennox was just a little bit more expensive than the other brands. And I've never heard anyone say, well, that's a pretty crappy unit, Lennox. But, I did the research. I got a 19 SEER. I was able to buy one that was a demonstrator model. It was used at a trade show, and they got this really big one. It's tall. It's got to be 4 feet tall at least. And it's a 4-ton / 2.5-ton. So it has a low speed and a high speed, and it's really, really efficient. But I want to tell you this, and I wanted to bring this up today with Dr. Richard Allen Miller. We're going to talk about heat in a little bit. The solar rays are so hot that our air conditioning unit has been running 24 hours a day, and we're only able to cool our house to 80 degrees. That's what I really wanted. I wanted it 80. I don't want it at 72. But I tried an experiment. I set the thermostat to 78. It can't do it. It can't do it. So even with closed cell foam insulation, even with 6 inches of insulation in the walls and 12 inches of insulation in the ceiling, we still can't cool our house below 80 degrees in this heat wave that has been beating everyone, or almost everyone on the planet. So I just wanted to share that. David, what else would you like to share with us?
Now, what we did for emergencies is we have a generator if the power ever goes out. And yes. But we wound up buying a smaller air unit that's actually on wheels, so you can wheel it around. And we have had to use the generator in the summer and in the winter when the power goes out. So with my wife and her health condition, we had to close off one room, and and we use that and the generator. We would only run the generator for a short, certain time after everything gets calmed down, and then we would, bleed the generator lines out is what I always do. With the same thing with my tractor and everything. I don't let.
You're talking about the fuel lines.
Yeah, I put off shut-off switches even in our tractor, and I just don't shut it off by the ignition. I let it drain all out, and then I shut it off. But everybody,
you have fuel line shut-offs. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
And we installed that on all of them because it can't be that good for all that gas sitting, in on the carburetor. So I always let the engine drain it all out. But it's amazing how many people don't want to talk to you until their power's out.
Hindsight, yeah, there it is. Whoops.
David, I'm glad you brought that up, because in a little over a month, I'm going to be on stage at the Electric Cooperative running for the board of directors, and that is exactly the message that I'm going to be delivering. That a lot of people don't want to talk to you until there's no electricity, and they keep reelecting these same people who keep raising the rates and have no clue as to what they're doing.
And they always give the same excuse every season. They want to raise the rates. Either it doesn't matter if it's too hot, too cold. They come up with a reason why to raise the rates.
Yeah, it hasn't been hot enough, so we have to raise the rates. It hasn't been cold enough, so we have to raise the rates. Nothing's changed, so we have to raise the rates. You're absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Well, you see what's about to happen with your food prices. Because this
absolutely.
drought and the stuff that's happening around the world right now is going to affect September, October, and November's food that's going to be just in time delivered to you from some weird country you've never even heard of. It's going to get real bad shortly.
Yeah, everybody's trying to get...
Yeah, it's not about heat anymore. It's about water. It's about air and the air quality. It's about... I'm going down the list, and here we are at the end of days. And I think it's time that we start talking about literal instead of the BS about air conditioning. Air conditioning is a luxury. I never used it when I lived up in Seattle. But down here, the air quality is so bad from forest fires. It is so bad from humidity. It is so bad from, it is becoming unlivable. And when I say that, I mean literally. And when you realize that the oceans that are above us in the atmosphere right now, the rivers, they talk about water, and what's about to happen in the Midwest when we have a couple of typhoons dropping that water, that's where the central part of the United States is going to be cut in half, not from geographic and the New Madrid fault line, but from these rivers that are moving above us that nobody's talking about. And when I'm concerned, and it's nobody in the media, including us, have mentioned it yet. And
let's mention
think
it.
that it's
Let's mention it.
You're not going to hear it on popular radio.
Well, let's talk about it on unpopular radio right here.
Mad Magazine. What? Me worry?
We have water we had water filters, and we keep extra water filters in case, we each have water filters for each one of us if something happens, and things like that. But when friends of mine would talk to me, well, why are you buying that? What are you going to do if something happens to the water? What are you going to do? You have to have water. What are you going to do?
Well, you can call Ghostbusters. What I'm doing is I'm about to release Workbook 3, which talks about a third grader running a mobile water testing laboratory to the grade schools, teaching first graders how to test for the purity of water. Even you or I don't really have that clue on how to do that. And it isn't even going to be a learned response until you're forced into it. And you're about to be forced into it. Just like you are food.
Whatever happened to science fairs? Where the students would use their imagination and innovation and compete with each other. Whatever happened to them? I guess it's not fair. Everybody has to win, right? Yep.
Yeah. Well, they're not even teaching kids how to write anymore. We've seen some articles where they're taking that out of the curriculum.
Right, you just type,
extremely intelligent, by the way. Just FYI, I am mentoring right now a group of millenniums, and when I say that they're intelligent, they're way, way more smart than the kids when I was a young kid. But they're not practical. They have no common sense. And boy, they can thumb wrestle better than anybody. But that is all. It's done with intent, and there will be blood.
Now, you're pretty familiar with water filters. We purchased Catadine. I think that's Catadine is what they're.
Yeah, Catadine. Yeah, sure.
Are they pretty well? I mean, they were pretty expensive, but we purchased 3 of them. The pocket ones.
There are several brands that are great. Berkey is another one. ProPure is another one. I happen to like the ProPure. They're
activated charcoal. That's what your campfire. Learning how to pull that and make your own from a campfire is what I would recommend. Not talking about something you're going to go down and buy.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
And here's David in Illinois. Here's just an aside. I got bitten by a recluse spider, and I had the bullseye. And what I did was I just took one of those water filters, one of those carbon water filters, and I washed my knife off. And I scraped some of the activated charcoal onto a piece of clean paper. So I just scraped my knife, and I got some activated charcoal powder, and I mixed it with a little bit of water into on a clean jar lid. Okay, and I used the jar lid to make this poultice. I put it on top of the spider bite. I put a Band-Aid on that, and it wasn't quite large enough. So the spider bite, let's say, grew to the size of a nickel, but I put an amount the size of a dime of this charcoal under a Band-Aid, and by the next morning, the skin that was covered by the charcoal was healed. Except there was a ring around it where I didn't go wide enough. So then I got some more charcoal, the size of a quarter, and put that over everything, and then within a day or two, it was all healed. So for me, that worked really, really well. And I sent a picture of this bite to my doctor, and the doctor said, "Nah, it didn't look like a spider bite." Oh, really? It was. Yeah. So bottom line is there are other uses for these activated charcoal water filters in addition. So if you've got a couple of those lying around and you wrap them in some kind of plastic like saran type wrap, that's what we do to keep the air from causing deterioration of the activated charcoal filters, you can keep them for a lot longer. And what we do is we put only one water filter in our ProPure water system, and it takes longer, but we have the extra filters as spares. David in Illinois, thank you so much for being with us. Mark in Illinois, you're up next when we come back from this commercial break. Doc Ram's with us. I'm Vincent Finelli. Doc Ram's with us. Mark, you're up in just a second. I've got an important announcement. I talked to Dane Wigington, and the day before yesterday, I gave him a call, and he's got an event coming up on Saturday, July 28th. And it's at the Holiday Inn in Redding, California. It starts at 3 o'clock, and it's open to the public at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. And the first presentation will begin at 5 p.m. And they've got discounted rates if you want to go to the Holiday Inn and stay there. And if you want the discounted rates, mention geoengineeringwatch.org. You'll get the discounted rate. The event is free. Okay, it's a public awareness event, and it will be at the Holiday Inn Convention Center. They seat up to 600 people, and they're going to provide verifiable evidence to the public on the ongoing global climate engineering, geoengineering programs that are wreaking havoc on our atmosphere, environment, and human health. It's a free event. It's a free event. And thank you very much, Dane Wigington. I'll put a link on the website, USA Prepares, during the second hour of this broadcast. Mark in Illinois, welcome. You're on with Doc Ram.
Yeah, good morning. I called in, I was talking about those two comets that traveled in pairs, but there's something out of Orion. There's a window opening up in Orion, and it's actually recorded in the book of Job, and in the scriptures, in the book of Jeremiah, there was a recorded event that talks about Genesis chapter 1, and whatever happened on the earth at that time is recorded in the book of Jeremiah chapter 4, and verses 23 and 25. So it was an extinction level event that happened upon the earth without the entire civilization, and so God had to restart the earth again, repopulate the earth again. You can read that in Jeremiah chapter 4. But in the book of Job, there is that talks about Orion and the Pleiades and the chambers of the south. Well, there is a conjunction happening with these comets that is opening a window in Orion, and there's something coming out of that solar system into ours. And I think it happened before, and it's happening again.
Rick, your comments?
Well, I don't know where to go with this. Yes, this is important, what he's talking about. The sun is going into a solar minimum right now. That means that there's not a lot of activity on the sun itself. So as the sun is streaming through space, rather than absorbing particulate garbage in front of it, it is streaming around the sun and into the earth right now. That is what is causing the earth to expand. That is what has caused the absorption of these neutrinos and other creepy things that are going on right now. The physics is not well known yet. And so when we have ionized streamers of ionized radiation in space called dragondales, and the Earth goes through those, what happens? Well, there's pole shifts, temporary magnetic pole shift. The Earth itself is beginning to change its tilt, and the Mediterranean is now starting to move. The actual physical tilt of the planet is no longer 23 degrees. What does that mean? The Earth is also wobbling in its orbit. And those perturbations are having an effect on our emotions, not even talking about the physical, emotional. Everybody noticed how uptight everything is?
Everywhere. Mark in Illinois, thank you so much for calling in and being with us. Doc Ram and I will be right back after these few short commercial announcements. I'll tell you how I apply N-Dust to the furnace filters and how you won't have to buy any more from now on if you follow this procedure. This is USA Prepares. I'm Vincent Finelli. We'll be right back. All set? Cocked, locked, hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Doc Ram's with us. And Joey in Michigan. Welcome, Joey.
Hey, good morning, guys. How are you?
Wow. Hi, Joey.
Isn't it great to hear his voice?
Yeah.
Yep.
It's like the land that time forgot. It's always the same. Hey,
Yeah.
here's a question. Here's a question I've been pondering. The memory of water. Rick, you're always talking about water and how it holds memory. And when you watch the different YouTube videos with the Japanese guy, when he plays classical music, it's one way. When it's acid rock, it's another way. Then when they take water from a city water, which what do? They regurgitate sewage. They clean it up, and then you got your cancer treatments, your chemo in there. You've got your opioids. You've got your antidepressants. You can never get that memory out of the water. Then I noticed a lot of the cities now, to save time and money, they put the antennas right on the giant water tanks. So how can you because the water's been poisoned with the chemicals, the genetic frequencies have been altered with those antennas. So how would you suggest you could clean the water? Any ideas?
Yeah. Well.
That's what I've been saying.
First, let's start with Japan and a bunch of Buddhists sitting there praying over the lake to change the fish. That's about where we are technologically. Now, none of it's true, and it's all real. So, water is the first dipole molecule that can be considered like a dimensional gate. That means there's levorotary. That means the molecule is going in this way, the para. We'll have it going that way, and we'll call it orthopara. Water is the first molecule of many, many, many molecules that have memory. The memory part has to do with the dipole moment and the fact that you have reflected pairs, kind of like in your brain, kind of like Nibiru, and kind of like, oh, what's going on here? Nobody has a clue. What we're doing is trying to imagine how it might work. That becomes the leading theory for the moment. And the opiates become cannabinoids and CBDs.
What does that mean?
Well, it means what would you like it to be? Because that's what's real right here in this reality is, okay, good. Now that's rule 1. Rule 2, you're a child. It's time for you to start training your mind, because it is the mind that is creating this nonsense, including the end of days. Biblical, Shakespeare, whatever. You can read anything you want into biblical scripture. The biblical scripture, newsflash, is older technology written by sciences of that era. And that's your Sefer Yetzirah and how to use sound and words. Now, technology has many faces, and it's important that you realize that this universe that you're currently enjoying as conscious and awake and alive is illusion and not real. It's not real. I have written articles on that to prove it. That's why the laws in physics and the water that has all this crap in it has a bunch of stuff in it. It is literally 6 zeros more efficient in storing information than gallium when it touches arsenic. And that's your computer chip. Now, when you have two elements that touch each other, a forbidden zone or information zone is created. That is the information going from one element to another. And when you have a dipole moment with a molecule, now what you have is a dimensional gate that allows you to go up and down in terms of levels of information. And the whole thing has to do with imagination. And that, what is it that you want in your water? If you want it to heat.
It's interesting where you're going with this. You know what a frother is when you use it to whip up milk to make for your coffee? It's a little handheld thing. It looks like an electric toothbrush with a wand on it with a little donut on the bottom.
There it is.
when I use my vitamins, the bulk vitamins, I have a frother. I put it in the cup with water, and I stir the water up. Well, ironically, it creates that vortex you're always talking about.
Well, just like Coriolis forces do going down the sink. And so if you want to restructure the water, you stir it in the opposite direction so that at least you're trying to balance Coriolis forces predicated on which hemisphere you're in. Now, these are rituals. And these rituals are what determine your behavior and your addictions. And the level of an addiction, turning it into a tool, is a very fine line between, fear of something and using that fear as a tool to allow you to do something as a blessing. It's a very fine line between the one and the other. And that's why they call it 200 Shades of Gray. And it's going to take an entire series of lifetimes to get it right. And right now, you're in the process. I don't know that means.
If you're spinning the water in a clockwise fashion, but you're taking the wand going clockwise and you're pushing it backwards, what are you doing to the water?
You're restructuring it, bringing it back into neutral so that you've cleaned it essentially.
You can do that. Because I noticed when I do the C60 with the little water cup, you push the button, it makes its little, whatever it's making, hydrogen water.
Yeah.
I take that water. Now I've got my hydrogen water. I stick the wand in there. I turn it on, and I start laughing at it, talking to it. I mean, as ignorant as it sounds. And after about 2.5 weeks, as you'd put it, the magic starts to begin.
Well, that's exactly right. That's exactly correct. You are creating your own universe right then, and the water that you're drinking.
But let's take, now you're in the city, you're in a cesspool. They've used reprocessed, reclaimed cesspool water with all the drugs in it. They put it in those beautiful water towers up in the air, and then they have those 4-foot cubes. The one water tank within a 30-mile radius of me here, they're repainting it. I've never seen anything like it. They brought trailers with giant concrete counterbalance, and they stuck the antennas up right under the water tank. They didn't want those antennas to stray too far from the water tank. And it's interesting because, it's in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where it's at. I had to back up. And what's ironic is across the street from these water tanks are just a ginormous medical facility on top of it. So those antennas have to be functioning in a way. They have to be functioning in a way that they're adding, I don't know what they're adding to the water, the vibration rate, the alpha wave, and Lord knows when they're playing their little electronic.
Well, that's true. The Lord does know. And that's the part of it that's creepy.
Right.
Joey, I've got a comment, and I'd like to share it with you and Rick about exactly what you're talking about. And Joey, I want to compliment you. You always come up with a different way of looking at things. And,
well, that's
and when
why
you mentioned,
it's Joey.
Yeah. Well, I've got a comment, and I'd love to hear about the physics from Rick. So these water towers, Joey, in our neck of the woods, and all the water towers I've seen all over the country are made out of iron and steel, either formed plates that are curved, if they're like a bulb on the end of a hollow tube, or whether they're the old-fashioned type, but they're iron and steel plates, either welded or riveted together. Now, they are attached to the ground, so they're grounded. Now, let's put an antenna on top, because I think that's what you're talking about. So now we have a vertical antenna on top of the water tower. So this antenna, when it transmits, typically a stick antenna, just a pole, will transmit 360 degrees. It will transmit all directions except straight up and straight down. Now, the water tower is right under, most of the time, under these towers. So the tower is the mounting system for the antenna. So the antenna is transmitting all around, but not up and not down. Now, the water tower is, because it's an iron or steel and iron fabrication, it becomes a Faraday cage. But here's where it gets really interesting. That water tower will absorb the radio frequencies from all around it. Okay? So probably not so much from the antennas that are mounted on it, but the antennas that it can see all around it. So it is literally picking up these radio frequencies, as you've been discussing them, from other antennas, which are really close. There's cell phone antennas, probably a bunch of them within just a couple miles of this water tower. There are radio transmitting towers. They're big, tall, 300-foot antennas. Television transmission and towers. Then you have the municipal, two-way radio systems, like the police cars, the ambulances, and all that. So you've got antennas everywhere, and these water towers are absorbing those radio frequencies. And the question is, when we come back, Joe, if you'd like to stay with us, Rick, now we know for certain, based on what I've just said, that those water towers are absorbing those radio frequencies. Microwaves, long waves, short waves, all kinds of waves. We'll be right back. What's happening to the water? Doc Ram's with us. USA Preparedness Instructor Joey is with us in Michigan. And Joey, about this water tower question that you had, it's absolutely a great question. So I know where you live, and I typed in the town where you live. I typed in 100 West Main Street. Now, I just picked, the center of town, 100 West Main Street in your town in Michigan. Now, would you say that's somewhere near where you live? Is that, am I way off? Or
within 3 miles, and there's probably 100. There's 100 antennas, 120 antennas listed. Not to mention the ones, the township, they're going to get rich. They put these on there, and every year they add another layer to them. Like, nobody knows that's happening. But within a 10-mile radius, there's probably 700 antennas. And this is in a remote area. You can only imagine, like when you and me were visiting Rick at that cyclotronic seminar in Chicago a few years ago, and we were riding around, and we're looking at the amount of antennas, and it's right. You got the one on a water tank, and all the other ones are bouncing back to it, so they're feeding it. And it's a cycle of evil is what it is. I mean, it can't be to your benefit.
Mm-hmm. Well, the point that I was making, and you've made it for me, is I just did a search on how many towers. There are so many towers. It's unbelievable. And that electromagnetic radiation, those radio frequencies, they don't work for free. So there's electricity going into the transmitters to send these radio waves and radio frequencies outward, okay? Well, they go somewhere, and they get picked up by whatever they run into. And these big towers, there's a lot of mass to them, and they absorb a lot of radio frequencies. Now, the proof would be, okay, so stand on the other side, climb up on your own tower, right next to, put a ladder up on the back side of that tower, that water tower, and then see if you get reception. And you'll find out that you probably don't. You probably don't get reception because that water tower is blocking and absorbing those radio frequencies, exactly what you're talking about. So now, yes, the water tower is a Faraday cage for the most part, but it's conducting, absorbing those radio frequencies and radio waves, and they are being transmitted through the metal of the water tower into the water. No question in my mind That's what's happening. And if any of you are radio frequency engineers and you're listening to this, I would love to hear what your thoughts are. And I'd love to hear that what we're saying is not true, because I believe it absolutely is true. Rick, your thoughts?
I'm concerned. Yeah, I'm with you, Vincent. I'm concerned about the fact that we have basically the reason we're on Earth with an atmosphere is to shield us from this kind of stuff. Our bodies, our physical bodies, have LD50 ratios. Each organ has certain bandwidths that it will absorb and be toxic to that. The heart and brain. I mean, we're talking about synthetic telepathy. That's just the beginning of it. There are things you can't even screen that. Wear aluminum foil around your head. Good luck. What they're doing essentially is bringing outer space down to the surface of the Earth. And
Rick, who's coming from outer space that needs the atmosphere morphed to fit their needs at the benefit of us? And who has genetically modified the food for the fat people down here, me being one of them? Because we're becoming food for whoever's coming here. I mean, realistically, as you'd call it, a metaphor, but when you think about it, this planet's been terraformed. It's being modified.
Yes.
Yes. I've talked
Joey,
to a guy.
yes. We've been invaded. Yes.
Okay.
We've been invaded. I don't know what it is. We call it, a black mold, slime mold.
Right.
It's in our forests. It's toxic. And yet it thrives at Fukushima and Chernobyl and is attacking Washington, D.C., and all the monuments. The white monuments are all starting to show black mold. It is invasive everywhere. And so, your alien may not have a physical body like you would presume in the movies. It have all kinds of forms and metaphor related, where you're not even saying how it's affecting your emotions, your intellect.
Joey,
I got another question on UV.
Okay, hold that thought, and we're going into commercial break. And Joey and Doc Ram and I will be right back. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us, and if you'd like to go to the website, richardallenmiller.com, Richard, A-L-A-N, Miller.com, and you can peruse the selections, and you may purchase the books right there. Joey in Michigan, USA Preparedness Instructor, is with us. And Joey, you want to talk about ultraviolet?
The UV. I met a guy really good at gardening, real good organic gardener. I bumped into him in a Goodwill store. It's kind of funny. He's a proponent. He really follows Dane Wigington to the wire. But he made a statement. He says, when we were kids, he says the UV used to be 3 and 4. Now it's 12 and 16. And his garden this year, he's using a heavy mulch with mounds, like little berms, because his ground's wet. But he made a good point. The UV is killing all the microbacterium in the soil, so it's taking your ability to naturally produce food, and it's killing it. And my garden, I always had an awesome garden. And this year, half of the plants that I bought, they died. They just died right out there. They're watered.
Yeah, Joey, that's welcome to the world. That is happening everywhere right now.
And most people are too busy texting their friends, going to Little Debbie's soccer game and Little Johnny's baseball game, and they really don't have a clue, and they really got to tell the whole world, what they ate for dinner last night on the Book of the Face, which that was a beautiful, beautiful ad they had that Facebook stocks dropped because people are less and less going there. And what a shame. What a tragedy for Facebook. It's a good company like that. What a shame. But how could you protect? Is there a way to protect the soil? Yeah, you know exactly what I mean, Rick. Is there a way to protect the plants, the soil from the UV? A shade cloth isn't going to cut it. Is there any kind of extra minerals to put in the soil to combat that, or not really?
Yeah. What you need to do, Joey, is grow underground and indoors with vertical aquaculture. And that's the new technology, because shortly nobody's going to be able to do anything on the surface of the earth. And farmers in the Midwest, where you are right now, have noted the blowfly in the pigsty is dead, is noting that the ant outside is less. The smaller insects are being affected first on the food chain.
The only thing there's abundance is that little roly-poly thing, and somebody told me that eats radiation. You know, if you touch it, it rolls into a ball. It looks like
nothing eats radiation. What you're talking about, absorption or transference. And even in your body, all the different organs have bandwidth, just like plants. Plants, like the broccoli, is bandwidth specific over cauliflower. And that's why LEDs are now being used, because they're very cool. They don't heat up, and you don't have a lot of waste in your light. And you are giving the plant what it most maximally wants in bandwidth. And at some point, you're going to be doing this in deep space with some kind of a screen from the gamma rays and other things that are out there coming in. It isn't going to be a big glass dome, because even today, with shielding, you can't make it to Mars fast enough to be dead from radiation poisoning. That's what our atmosphere is about. And that's what the 5G towers are bringing, that technology from the one end of outer space down to the surface of the Earth. And your UVBs that you're actually talking about, the longer ultraviolet radiation from the sun and other places in space, are now having an effect on everything. And that is a serious problem, especially now with food production. If you think starvation is bad at this moment, watch what happens this winter. I'm very concerned.
I'm behind you, and they claim, what's he called? Ice Farmer, somebody, a YouTube station. He claimed that Nebraska, Kansas, and Colorado, they had a complete failed wheat crop because of 75-mile-an-hour winds and a hailstorm. And that was just like 2 weeks ago. And between him and ADAPT 2030, with all the spring crops being late, we've got corn 6 inches tall and 6 foot tall with tossels in the same field because of the lack of water or the too wet of soil. So, yeah, the food, that's not even a consideration. Tell me this. I talked to a guy from Canada. He told me during the war, the Germans ran like a copper something off the roof with a copper wire, kind of like a lightning rod assessor, only different. They had a copper across the ridge. The copper went down into the basement. They had a copper sheet on the floor, and in total darkness, they could generate the proper energy for the plants to grow in darkness through a form of like a photosynthesis.
I can't comment on that. That's interesting technology, and I'd like to research that with some links at some point. But I can tell you, copper is an important element, and why Cleopatra was going down the Colorado River looking for it.
Yeah. Could you wonder how they got copper from the UP of Michigan and from Arizona? That's the only two places the copper that is in the pyramids in Egypt came from, anywhere on the earth, because it has a certain amount of silver in it. I guess that's how they can track it. And
well, copper, copper's like the water. Remember, when water touches anything, it changes it. And, when it touches plastic, you can see the very minor amount of electrostatic with the water trying to go up the side of the plastic, just nominally. However, if that was metal, like tellurium, it'll go all the way up 6 feet and go over the edge.
I bought a copper serving tray at one of the junk stores for $3. It's probably 18 inches in diameter. And I will put it down in my low back and lay on it when I go to sleep just to see what will happen. And in the morning, I have no pain. But if I take that copper tray and I put it on my chest, within about 15 minutes, I start to vibrate and shake. And my heart just starts pumping like all get out. I pull that thing off. I put it back under. I can lower it, but if I keep it over my heart, it's way too much energy. It's pumping into it. And
you are now verging into Wilhelm Reich and Nikola Tesla and some of the directions in physics we chose not to follow at moments of discovery. And there's something more going on here. And we don't have the answers to that, but you have just discovered something on how to get rid of pain using copper. The way my mama taught me was that I put it around my wrist, and it'll take care of my elbow. And it's that copper oxide. Now, copper has a unusual series of properties that distinguish it from one metal over another. And silver is another one. We call it monoatomic and colloidal. And when it's in different phases, it seemingly has different properties than it has as an element, just laying there on the ground. Copper is something that I have used when I played tennis. And so I can tell you there's something going on there, but as far as the knee bone connected to the thigh bone, the hokey pokey, and you turn it all around, I'm at a loss at this point. I recognize the probabilities. I also recognize the fact that science has chosen not to direct its energies in those areas of study yet.
Isn't that amazing what people will do for money? Hey, if you take this grant, sweep it under the carpet.
Yeah.
I've been doing colloidal copper for a year and a half. And when I get out of the shower in the morning, the first thing I do from top to bottom, I spray myself down with colloidal copper. I started with the bottoms of my feet, and the first week when I did that, I had the most unique dreams. Three-dimensional, deep color, unbelievable. And
keep a diary. What you're doing, discovering, may become important.
The other things I've been doing.
Wilhelm Reich did with sexual energy and orgasm.
They for his reward, they put him in a little cage, and he got to die of a heart attack. Which he was in the best of shape because him and his cloudbusters and Uncle Syphilis didn't like what he was doing, so they had to steal his technology and lock him away and give him,
One of the studies I did for the military was study a couple of Navajo shamans that apparently could change the weather like a cloudbuster using orgone. And what I saw was a bunch of sand paintings where they were using different metals, pouring them in to make a sand painting. And when you stepped back and looked at it, it looked like a solid-state physics device. Technology, like your monoatomic copper, has many, many faces. And the concepts of adding that with imagination, now you have the stuff that Walt Disney talks about.
Did those shamans were from what part of the country?
They were up in New Mexico. They were up near Shiprock, and there's a university there. And what I saw was as they were building the sand painting, it was like the movie Independence Day, where this big cloud started creating out of nowhere. It just started there, and like there's a big spacecraft behind it coming in, and it's creating an illusion or something. And then this one Navajo looked at me, looked down at the sand painting, looked back up at me and winked at me. And he ran his hand through the sand painting, and the cloud disappeared at the moment he broke the thing. That's when I looked at the sand painting more closely, and it reminded me with dissimilar colors and patterns of solid-state physics devices, where you had several different kinds of metals or minerals that were dyes, that were colored, that were interfacing with each other to create a technology we don't even talk about yet.
Rick.
Joey, let's go.
Are they? Okay.
Joey, we're going into a break. When we come back, I'd like to talk about that serving tray that you bought, that copper serving tray, because I believe
he's got a back problem.
well, here's why. We talked about the water tower effect, the electromagnetic radiation. He's sticking an antenna on his chest.
Yes.
Let's think about that.
Yes. Metal. Yes.
Yep. We'll be right back. A copper serving tray, and you feel that it affects your heart. Well, that's another antenna, and you're putting it right on your skin. So I just wanted to to mention that it makes a lot of sense to me, especially if you're in an area with a lot of electromagnetic frequencies and radiation, and if that antenna is of the right dimensions to be the wavelength of those frequencies. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Our buddy in the yellow T-shirt, Craig.
Yeah.
He sells copper coins. They're 1 ounce and 5 ounce.
Yes, he does.
So I have 7 of each. And when I have a metal box I meditate in, it's like an orgone box like Rick was talking about.
Right.
And when I do that, I put the different size coins on the different chakra points. And that'll take you to a place. In the land, time forgot, in our yellow submarine.
Okay, so what an orgone box is organic, inorganic, organic, inorganic layering. And the more layers you use, the more orgone is apparently able to be collected. I had several grad students do some studies for me at the University of Washington when I was working in military. And we made some very interesting, at that time, Patrick Flanagan was talking about pyramid power. And we wanted to vet all of that. And we discovered that the pyramids, the shape of that pyramid will change and sharpen razor blades because of grain migration. But in order to preserve food, if you used a normal pyramid, nothing happened. If you used it, it was made with an orgone, as an orgone accumulator, which is an organic layering, like wood, and then inorganic, like dirt, and then wood again or something, where you had layers of organic and inorganic or inert material, that collects orgone. How does that work? Nobody knows. That was called Wilhelm Reich an orgasm, and the concept of the content collected in an orgasm as orgone.
Rick, you're talking about like the construction of a battery, where you have
there you go. Now you're getting the
alternating plates.
Yes. The Ark of the Covenant. Yes, that's what the Ark of the Covenant was a giant battery. In fact, when you talk in biblical terms, they stuck the 2 rods in the ground, and the troops wiggled like worms. And when who parted Moses, his sister, when she looked inside the Ark of the Covenant and was scarred, that's battery acid. And so I'm going to suggest that the Bible is a way back then of how scientists wrote their discoveries.
And now,
it's a way of looking at the Bible. Not that it's a proper way necessarily, but I'm going to say that when I choose to look at the Bible, I choose to look at it as it's been written by some scientists using a different concept of technology than me. And then the discovery I have of that is amazing.
Joey, back to you.
Hey, the different angles of the pyramid, does that have an effect on the way you're getting energy or
Apparently there is some technologies on that. I don't know what they are. And you have pyramids right up where you live. There are pyramids that have been built. Yeah.
That Mary Hardy's having her pyramid convention this week in Elgin, and I may go to that. I mean, she was at the cyclotron seminar when you guys were there last.
Yeah, I know Mary. Yeah, she's cool. Yeah.
Yep, we're out of time, guys.